Talia Schwartz. A little bit of feedback. Hi, I'm Talia Schwartz. I'm the vice chair of Hudson County Complete Streets, and so we thank everyone for being here, of course, and for staying for this last panel. I'm also the president of Safe Streets Jersey City, which makes this a particularly good panel for me to be participating in because we spend a lot of time looking at the safety of Jersey City streets, every intersection. We look at where people are crossing and how we can support communities. And so I'm very excited to join these fine people and talk about last mile transit. I'll also share from a just personal.
Bus benches.
Oh, okay.
It's not a fire. It's not a fireplace.
With the mic.
Oh, cute. Yeah. I can share that from a personal perspective. I also am a last mile transit user. I have to get to Journal Square Path Station very regularly. That's how I get to work. And I both ride my bike when conditions are good, and I take the bus when conditions are bad. And worst case scenario, I walk. It's a very far walk for me to get to Journal Square, about 30 minutes. So as we talk about public transit, and it's been such an interesting conversation this morning, and as our DOT commissioner said, the journey doesn't start right at the path station or at the bus station. It starts at your house. And so this panel is about how you get from where you live all the way to where you need to get and back. And so for a little bit of context, I am not alone in terms of people who need last mile transit in Hudson County. Sorry, let me just get this. Hudson County, we already talked about this, has the highest rate of commutes by public transit in New Jersey, with approximately 40% of people taking transit to work and another 25% who are walking and biking. So that is a lot of people who need access to what we're talking about right now. And after Hudson County, Essex and then Bergen are really close follows. So this is a very pertinent panel for today. And I am going to now pass this over to our panelists here. If you could please introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about the organizations that you're running and why it's relevant to today's panel. You can start, Tyler.
Hello, my name is Tyler Newcomb. I'm the president of Bike JC. Bike JC is Jersey City's nonprofit bike advocacy group. So we advocate for infrastructure, bike parking, and we also do some education and give people the tools to ride by bike, commute by bike, whether that's bike maintenance or how to ride safely in a city. My personal origin story of how I got involved in advocacy and how I became a commuter by transit and by bike is I was living in Newark and I was working in Jersey City, and I was taking the path every day from Newark to Grove Street, working as an EMT in Jersey City, and it was a really, really far walk from Grove Street to where I worked. It was about a 25-minute walk, and at the end of the night, if I got out exactly on time, I could make the path, and if I couldn't get out exactly on time, which is not common as an EMT, it was a little bit more challenging, and I would have to wait 40 minutes for the next train. So I realized I was paying $300 a month to park a car that I wasn't using, and I instead sold that car, bought a bike, and started getting around, in a multi-mobile trip every single day.
Thank you. Reba, thank you for joining us.
Hi everyone, my name is Reba Odoro. I'm a project manager with Horizon 54, which you may know as Equitable Cities. I work with Charles Brown and I'm in place of Charles Brown today. But my background is in civil engineering. Prior to joining Equitable Cities, Horizon 54, I worked with the New Jersey Department of Transportation for 7.5 years. My expertise is I've been a subject matter expert for bicycle and pedestrian planning and design, and I would say that's definitely been my passion, planning and designing for pedestrians, bicyclists, and just making roads more inclusive for everybody.
Amazing, and I apologize, I didn't introduce myself when I was moderating, so I'll do it now, I suppose. Thanks for the opportunity, Talia. And my name's Andy Kaplan, for those that don't know. I've been a resident here in Jersey City in the area for a while. I have 2 young kids, and those are the why, for me, as you mentioned, Tyler, of, getting to where we need to go, but doing it safely, being able to walk around our neighborhood, being able to walk between neighborhoods, and being able to get to transit to connect to the rest of the region. My job, which I started a few weeks ago, is with the city here as the director of infrastructure. Before that, I worked for the MPO of the region that has a lot to do with funding. Before that was with the Port Authority, and background in engineering, traffic engineering, transportation engineering, and some experience in planning, especially in the safety and operations space. So excited to be here to talk about the very important topic. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Deborah Kagan. I am the executive director of the New Jersey Bike and Walk Coalition. Thank you. We are the statewide advocacy organization, and we do all kinds of work around policy and programming and education, particularly to help make New Jersey a more walkable and bikeable state and a safer state. And we do that because we see that active transportation is really critical to making New Jersey a more sustainable, economically viable, and equitable state. So that's sort of the lens that we do this work around. And we do it both on street, and we also do trail development or off street. So we see the combination and the connection between both of those things as part of our work. We worked on things like the Essex-Hudson, or the Hudson-Essex, since we're in Hudson. Greenway, also called the Greenway, as well as policy things like you may be familiar with the new e-bike law and working around education. Thank you very much. We agree with that. We can talk about that in a bit. And personally, so I live in Montclair, New Jersey, which is in Essex. I think I'm the first person up here from Essex County today, possibly. There's a heavy representation from Hudson, which is great. But North Jersey also has some other counties that we want to talk about. And I got involved because I bike and walk in my own town, and I wanted to see safer streets to do that. And I really understood that this was about the quality of life in my town, not just about biking and walking. So that's how I got involved. And I just want to take one quick sec to thank Hudson County Complete Streets as the statewide organization. We work with many, many partners and advocates across the state. And you guys did a tremendous job today. And we want to applaud your work. So shout out to Hudson County Complete Streets.
Thank you all for giving us the introduction. As you can see on this panel, we have kind of people who have worked at the individual level with people planning safe streets every day. We have people that are working on policy and in between. And I want to start with the lived experience of what people are going through when they're trying to get to last mile. I think, Reba, your organization was involved in a demonstration project, and part of that was to help teach people about the importance of last mile transit options. So can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, for sure. So the project I think you're referring to is our Freeway Drive for All project in Orange and East Orange. So my company, Horizon 54, we worked with Orange and East Orange through the US DOT Thriving Communities program and provided technical assistance to both communities. The corridor of Freeway Drive, it's been one that has historically experienced many pedestrian crashes, and there have been past planning efforts to improve safety along this corridor, but things have stalled, and with capacity at the local government level, sometimes it's difficult to push those types of projects forward. So what our role was in this project was to provide extra capacity to these communities, help them through technical assistance to develop a demonstration project that would basically show residents what it feels like to experience a safe street, what it feels like to cross a protected crosswalk, a protected intersection. The demonstration project, we were able to work with local artists. We had these really bright, vibrant curb extensions, high visibility crosswalks installed near both train stations in Orange and East Orange. And we were able to co-create this with the community, which I thought was a very important key piece of this, because when people are able to see their ideas reflected in projects, they take more ownership over it, they feel more pride about it, and they're more likely to care about it and want to see longer term investment. So that was something that I learned from that project. Is definitely, it's so important to involve the community, listen to their lived experience, because we can collect all the crash data and that does tell us a very important part of the story, but going on a deeper level and hearing what people are experiencing when they actually cross the streets, when they drive on these streets, that tells so much more than sometimes what crash data can tell us, and it fills in the gaps and helps us get a clear idea of like where to go from there. So.
If any of you would like to add to that, no pressure, but yeah, if you'd like to. Thank you,
no,
Reba.
I'll just add, crash data is a really valuable tool that we use because it's the only data that oftentimes exists. And it's better than nothing. But statistically speaking, I'm a recovering academic. I'll put that hat on. But statistically speaking, crashes don't really represent the true risk on many of our roadways. It's only where a number of system failures have occurred that resulted in a crash. And to get a better understanding of where the next crash happens, if you don't know anything, crash data is a good surrogate measure. But there are other measures such as talking to the community, engaging with the people, crossing guards, people who have lived experience, because they know where those risks are. So that's such a critical aspect, and such a great, excited to hear that Freeway Drive really embraced that.
Thank you. All right, now we'll zoom out a little bit to talk about the systems that are, contributing to safety or otherwise. Deborah, if you don't mind, talking to us a little bit about the state's complete street policy work and where we're at right now. I know that most counties or all counties have a safety action plan, and how are we seeing these implemented? We know that funding might be at risk in some areas, but what are kind of our biggest opportunities that you see? And everyone can answer if you have knowledge on this topic.
Yeah, so we're at an interesting point, I think, right now around planning around safety, due to a couple of factors that have been brought together. So one of those, of course, is funding from the IIJA, the bill that had a lot of money available, and particularly for a discretionary grant, SS4A. So a lot of the counties in the state, along with some of the municipalities, along with some of the MPOs that have funded this, provided for funding to create complete safety, local safety action plans, right? So we now have just about every county in the state has either created one or is in the process of creating one, which is a major achievement, right? We also have this year a bill that our organization and many of you helped to support, and that was the creation that was announced in January of the Target Zero Commission, which is a state-level commission of 13 different departments at the state, all working together to create an action plan with safety as the priority. This is the only one of extent of a commission like this in the country. So these are two really important pieces to pushing forward an agenda for safety in the state. And as everybody knows, New Jersey has one of the highest fatality rates in the country, and 30% of those fatalities, almost 600 usually yearly, is pedestrian and cyclists. So extremely high, almost twice the national rate for that. So safety has become a really important issue to talk about transportation and active transportation and complete streets. the initiative of having these plans now gives us an opportunity. But these are planning, right? These are plans. And what we have seen across the state, there's over 180 towns that have complete streets policies, right? But most of those policies do not get implemented. But recently, we've had almost 20 new complete and green streets. This is an upgraded policy for complete streets. And the complete streets policy is really a place where a lot of the funding and planning for biking and walking happens. Because we're looking at streets that are supposed to be for everybody, not just cars, right? So we've had some real progress in some of these, and the new model for those complete streets policies often includes checklists and committees to do oversight. So one of the problems of the past has been implementation. We have a lot of plans across the state. We don't have a lot of good implementation for bike ped infrastructure in the state. It is a weak point for us. So these are a couple things that I just mentioned. One thing, those are all really positive things that have happened. At the same time, we're having some pushback around policy, which I had mentioned, the e-bike law, which restricts micromobility in the state. So we're seeing sort of contradictory messages right now.
So I know we're at a transit forum, and I just wanted to take a moment and link. We're talking here a bit about safety for all users and transit. And, you know, good transit policy is good safety policy. If we look at, studies have been done that look at victims of traffic violence and fatalities per capita, and the areas that have the lower per capita fatalities of traffic violence are those with good transit in urban areas where there's other ways to get around. Because the best judge of your risk of being killed in a traffic fatality is how many miles are driven around you. So, you know, I know we're talking about safety, but I also want to make that linkage that good transit is good safety and good safety is good transit.
I want to ask a question, a follow-up question based on what Deborah just said, and thank you, Andy, for jumping in. This one is for Tyler and Andy, and then anyone else if you want to add as well. What big gaps are missing in our last mile transit in Hudson County, or from your experience locally? I think where would you see kind of the biggest gaps that need to be addressed and highest priorities?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest gaps, and one of the things that kind of shocked me when I got into advocacy was different streets are controlled by different agencies. And for most of us here, like, that makes perfect sense. We know this. This is, like, you know, fundamental to our work as advocates. To your average person who's just getting around, that seems insane, right? Like, this street is dangerous. I want my government to fix it. Okay, which level of government is that? It's a remarkable thing to ask of someone who just wants safer streets. So I think one of those biggest gaps is the partnership between the city and the state and the county levels. And we're seeing a lot of progress there, specifically in Hudson County. Hudson County having a Vision Zero task force, the state having a Target Zero task force is a great step in the right direction. As far as multimodal gaps, one of the biggest ones that I see, you know, I'm a cyclist primarily, is it's really hard on a lot of our transit systems to ride a bike to and from the stations. And there's several reasons for that. Parking is a huge issue, right? We have some really, really great parking facilities in Jersey City. Unipods are excellent. They're fully enclosed, and they have surveillance in them. We have some really good municipal city racks that are, you know, robust racks in public places where you can feel comfortable parking your bike there. But in a lot of places in the city, or, you know, if you don't want to ride to a PATH station and you want to ride to pick up a bus somewhere, your only options are signposts, sometimes along roads that there are not many people walking along, and it makes it a really easy target for theft, component theft and bike theft generally. And then, of course, the other option is barrier is bringing your bike on transit. So if you are going to a place where you need to ride your bike on the other end, right? I don't own a car in Jersey City. If I want to go into any of the New Jersey suburbs and I want to get anywhere outside of the train station on the other end, I need to bring my bike with me. And there are some challenges there, especially when it comes to e-bikes and some policies regarding, e-bikes on trains and on buses. A lot of that comes from fire risk, which is an entirely different topic that we don't have time to cover here. And so I think, one of the barriers that we could address is how can we make it easier for people to get around and to bring their bikes where they're going, whether that's racks on more NJ Transit buses, whether that's, looking at how we have bikes on the path. Are there better ways to do it that makes it easier for the riders and less of a nuisance to other riders who don't have bikes as well?
Yeah, so I think the question as it related to my side is how do we identify sites that need improvements and need safety, especially to provide access around transit. And I will actually need to shout out Lindsay from my team who's here and Eli who's not here from the team who are doing all this great work, have been for years, and my predecessors before I joined the city, where we have a lot of inbounds. We have a lot of requests, right, from community constituents about concerns near their house. We have a high injury network that's driven by data, right, the crash data that I just spoke negatively about, but it's also the best data we have. So we have our priorities, we have our high injury networks. And we also have other, planning priorities and outcomes we're looking at. We want to improve safety around schools, around parks, around senior centers. So what we do is we've developed a process, and by we I mean Lindsay and Eli, where we take all of our inbound requests and we put them into GIS, we understand where they are in the city, we link them to all these other affirmative planning goals, and we use them to try to prioritize our focus. Right now in Jersey City, the Department of Infrastructure is extremely bandwidth limited. We lost a few amazing critical people. We have a few amazing critical people left, and we just put a number of job postings up for engineers and some planners, and we are looking to address our bandwidth to deliver. So for us, there's so much need everywhere, and we want to address it all, but we're limited by budget, some contract capacity, and staffing. And so we're looking to expand our staffing. And I'd love to talk more about budget, but I won't, because we obviously are budget constrained, but there's a lot of way that we fund transportation isn't necessarily from local property taxes. It's from state gas tax. It's from state user fees, electric vehicle taxes. It's funded as a regional good, right? If you think about it, just put your car windshield brain on for a second. You shouldn't make the people who have the interstate in their neighborhood pay for the interstate in that town, right? We shouldn't make the people who have the train tracks that people ride through our town pay for the train tracks in those towns. These are regional assets, regional goods that support the entire region, and collectively as a region, we should be funding and paying for them. And that does happen. There's a lot of grants that come from state and federal programs, but there's also challenges with that. And so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I want to. Can you hear me? Yeah. Pick up a little bit on what Tyler brought up around parking for bikes. So, parking for bikes is one part of. Are we thinking about our first and last mile, which is what we're talking about on this panel, as part of our transportation system? Are we really thinking about more of a complete transportation system rather than individual pieces? So we talk a lot about transit and bus and path, and when we're doing our complete streets, we talk a lot about corridors, right? And we talk about intersections, but we're not really talking about it as a whole. And if you look at it from the perspective of a person, which is what Tyler was talking about to begin with, when you leave your house, you're not thinking about one intersection, one corridor. You're looking at the whole trip. And a lot of the way that we do planning and funding does not take into account that interconnectivity. And I think that's one of the pieces that are really missing, which is why first and last mile are not bookends to part of our transportation. They are key aspects. If we want people to use transit, we have to make it safe and accessible at the same time. And that means if you get on a bike and you are driving your bike down the road and suddenly the bike lane stops and you've got a dangerous arterial in front of you, you're not likely to want to keep biking like that. And that's because our planning isn't thinking of it as one trip, as a one journey, which is the way the commissioner explained that this morning, right? We should be looking at planning and funding from the perspective of the user, and that is a interconnected multimodal approach. And until we start doing that, I don't think we'll make major inroads into transit and getting people out of their cars across the state. Of course, you know, we're concentrated here in transit in this area, but if we really want to grow our non-car culture in the state, we have to look at this as a connected, multimodal approach.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on to that. I think that when we invest in transit systems, it's definitely important to look at the few blocks, the several blocks around the transit system, and think of that as one connected system. Because if you can't reach the train line, reach the buses, then it's not really useful to the people that actually need to use those forms of transportation. And then just speaking from personal experience growing up in a carless household, I grew up in Jersey, in the suburbs, so we didn't have access to a lot of transit, but I did still have to use transit to get to school, to get to after school programs and things like that. And not having transportation to things like, you know, school programs they can definitely discourage you from wanting to participate or do things you know, beyond what you have to do, because it's adding an extra layer of hassle, transporting yourself to those programs, things like that. So I think having a connected system, thinking of it as one thing, those blocks around the train station or around the bus stops, it's definitely so important, because if you can't get to the bus, get to the train, then you really can't use the train system in the way that you'd like. So
I think you're all bringing up really a great framing here, which, you know, we started talking this morning about the transit and the themes. It did repeat frequently that one of the biggest issues is resources or capacity or funding for these complex systems. Everyone wants more money to make more promises for better public transit, and we want that too. And we're kind of hearing the same thing on this panel right now, which is how do we prioritize you know, this section of the journey, and you know, what can we do as advocates or as you know, city officials here to make the case or to change the narrative around this last mile funding, because in a way it's actually the cheapest portion of the journey to fix. It doesn't require, you know, digging underground or digging underwater or connecting 12 municipalities and systems together. It actually just requires pretty simple fixes that we know what to do. So how do we jumpstart that or get it going without, you know, dealing with these same implementation and funding obstacles that we were talking about this morning? And well, I'd love to hear from any and all of you.
After you. All right, fine. Yeah, like you mentioned, I think this is often one of the cheapest keys, right? It's one of the cheapest pieces of the puzzle. And it doesn't always have to be infrastructure. The infrastructure is great, and it is a very, very important piece. But it can be something as simple as education or clearer signage directions to bike parking at transit facilities, right? Like you can run and you can get a sign for $30 and post it like bike parking here. And those are the sorts of things that I think just tweak that user experience very, very slightly in a way that maybe it doesn't help you the first time you go to Journal Square, right? Maybe you walk through and you say, oh, I never knew there was bike parking at Journal Square. Maybe a little bit of education around like the Unipods, right? If you don't know what that is, you might walk by it and just think it's a facility for, I don't know, some sort of power infrastructure or something. So sometimes it's little signages like little things like that, like signage or education. And then on the infrastructure side, a lot of times it's paint on the ground, right? Like that lane to Journal Square, I'll use Journal Square as an example. On Bergen Ave between SIP and when you get to Journal Square where it meets at JFK, it's painted for some of the way and then it loses its paint once you get to Journal Square. And where it loses its paint, that's where people park in it. That also is only a connection south of Journal Square. So if you arrive at Journal Square, or if you're going to Journal Square, and you're either heading south or you're getting there from the south, you have a good connection to Jersey City's bike network. It's safe, it's clearly marked. If you're going north, you don't. There's really nothing there. You're dumped onto, a 4-lane stretch of JFK, which is quite intimidating, loud. And I would be willing to bet that the data reflects in the City Bike dock usage. The one that's closer to SIP Avenue gets a lot more use than the one on Academy. Not Academy. I'm forgetting the name of the street, but a couple of blocks north of Journal Square. So I think connection, clear connection and clear signage, and just letting people know that multimodal trips are an option, whether it's by bike or scooter or walking, is cheap and effective.
Yeah, I would echo the same sentiment, but just having a more connected system and just speaking with residents, speaking with communities, I've learned that if the infrastructure is in place, people will walk. They do want to walk to places. It's the cheapest form of transportation you can have. Biking as well, with education paired with that. But I think a lot of the times people will choose not to take transit because of how long it takes to get to their destinations with the mixed modes. Just from experience this morning. I came from Philadelphia and I contemplated taking the train, but that would have been like a 5-hour trip. So I think a lot of people choose the road of less resistance because there just isn't the infrastructure or the design and the amenities in place for them to have a shorter, efficient trip, efficient trip by way of transit, and that's because we don't have a lot of communities. They don't have the connected bike paths, the connected walking paths. So a lot of the times it'll just be easier to hop in your car and get to your destination. But I think having a more connected system, considering those few blocks around the transit system as part of the transit system as opposed to the train itself, is so important because I think if people could walk to places, they definitely would choose to do so.
Yeah, during one of the panels this morning, it was brought up that one of the trips, she had a Uber panic, right? Remember that comment? And I thought that was really interesting because I have that all the time. Like I want to take more public transit, and I can't because it doesn't exist in some of the places that we live. So I think it is partly a problem of leadership, that we need to have leadership that same way we started to have leadership to recognize safety as a priority. And for instance, the Hudson Vision Zero Task Force is a great example of that, right? This piece has put forward safety as a priority, and that's now beginning to be implemented in what some of the local safety action plans will be in Jersey City, right? And it also has an existing structure for oversight, which is the task force is ongoing. We have to be looking at doing that and incorporating biking and walking and active transportation as part of that. It has not been really viewed as part of transportation. It's sort of an afterthought, right? Or it's recreation. And we get a lot of like, oh, biking is for recreation, right? Well, unless we start taking seriously that these are important pieces for transportation, if you live within a quarter mile to transit, you can walk. If we extend our infrastructure 2 miles out so that we have safe and reliable infrastructure for biking, that improves the number of people who can take transit 8 times, just for 2 miles out, right? So that has to begin to be seen as critical to our transportation planning in our decision makings for investment and all of the different factors that go with that to make people have confidence that when they start out walking or biking, they're going to get there on time safely. And that includes bike parking and lighting, as well as other parts of infrastructure. So I hope to see this move towards leadership that begins to recognize that, and the implementation of local safety action plans start taking that piece seriously as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think the point's been brought up a number of times about jurisdiction. Nobody really cares that somebody runs the PATH train and somebody else runs the bus that I take to the PATH train and somebody else manages, the traffic signal that I have to cross on Kennedy Boulevard and someone else manages the bike lane that I'm going to bike in, and then all these hundreds of property owners have to maintain the sidewalk, right? We've created this complexity, and we're doing our best to manage in it. But I think, the best way we can handle that comes from kind of this what you talk about, that systems thinking, and starting from the top, starting with affirmative planning. And in Jersey City, we right now are doing a transportation master plan update. Every municipality in the state of New Jersey is required to have a transportation element to their master plan. Varying degrees of what level of thought they've put into them, but in Jersey City, we're using an NJTPA grant, and that is going to help us understand not just a single modality, not just a single problem. Where are people coming from? Where are they trying to go? And what are the challenges that they're facing? We know, and we've seen from kind of the results, that infrastructure for biking and walking is critical in a place like Jersey City. And look, we're a city. Of course it is. We have density of development. We have not length of trips, but perfect trips for biking and walking, and not necessarily the historic infrastructure to support that. And so we've been following our bike master plan. We've been building out as much as we can to create these modalities, but it all really should link back to a master planning element that is agnostic to the jurisdiction and really looking at what the people in a municipality or city or county are looking to move.
I just want to add one other piece to this, which Congresswoman McIver brought up, right? And that is to look at trails as part of our overall transportation system. So she talked about a bill at the congressional level to introduce Parks to People, to build trails. And it's one of the projects that we are very proud we're part of, and that we've initiated, the North Jersey Trail Network, which is a 6-county initiative to build trails. And we have to see that the trails are not also just for recreation, but they are part of a whole system that we should be looking at. And the connectivity to trails, to walking, to transit should be part of that system.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask this question about Essex County. Essex County is one of the deadliest counties in New Jersey for pedestrians. It has an average of 50 deaths per year. So I don't know if you know the answer to this, but if you do, Reba and Deborah, if you can help, what can Essex County advocates do to help achieve Vision Zero, or at least get us going? And maybe you can start with your experience in East Orange and what you're seeing on the ground.
So I would say what I learned in my experience with Orange and East Orange is that demonstration projects, temporary projects, are very powerful tools to show people what safer streets can feel like, can look like, and basically build excitement towards this is what we could have in our neighborhood, what we could have in our community, and walking to our destinations, biking to our destinations doesn't have to feel dangerous all the time. It doesn't have to be, such a burden. So basically, those type of temporary projects to demonstrate and show people what things could look like in the long term is something that I would definitely recommend. And if you don't work with a government entity, you're not under, like NJDOT, you don't work with Jersey City or the City of Newark. There are still grants out there that community members and community advocates can apply for on their own. So that's something that I would definitely recommend looking into. And also just working with the community as well, I think is very integral. It helps to build a shared vision towards, less traffic fatalities, less traffic deaths, and help understand where people feel unsafe in their communities and get a better understanding of what we can do from there to make those places, make those intersections, make those segments feel safer. Vision Zero, it's definitely not something that is going to be achieved through one project or one effort. It's an ongoing effort, and there's multiple things that you can do, and those are just a couple of things that I would recommend. But I think it's important to work with the community, co-create with the community to establish that buy-in and create a shared vision towards less traffic fatalities, safer roads.
So Essex County, and that coughing was not in reaction to Essex County. I'm sorry. Essex County has just completed a Vision Zero plan. There are a number of recommendations in that plan. One of the things that could be done is to actually take this as a priority of safety in the county and implement what's in the plan. Literally, we don't implement what's in our plans. If our leadership would prioritize the work that has been done to identify actual proven countermeasures that can be implemented with the funding we have, we would make a long ways to reducing our fatalities in the county.
Okay. Yeah.
And if I may, actually, in a prior role, I sat on the Essex County SS4A planning team, and I think one of the biggest challenges, and this is beyond Essex County, but beyond Hudson County, one of the biggest challenges when we try to be innovative to do the seemingly easy safety things, the antithesis, the opposite of innovation is design standards. Design standards. And engineers, and I am an engineer, engineers who won't say yes to try to do something if it's not coming out of a previously designed and vetted manual. And that's something that I think is a process and legal or fear of liability, whether it's really there or not, but we need to think about ways, how can we embrace doing different and new things by not being stuck in these design standards and these engineering review processes that are preventing agencies from implementing their SS4A goals.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, yeah.
Design standards.
Okay, we have to wrap up. I do want to give everyone just one last word before we wrap up, and we got to do it fast. So if everyone could think for a second about the single most important thing, one policy, just one, or one investment, or one behavioral change that would do more than anything else to improve first and last mile connectivity in New Jersey. And we know that it's not going to be only one thing to do the job, but just what's the one thing that you would share with this audience? And sure, if you're ready to, anyone who's ready to go first can start.
I can go first. I would say complete streets policy, which is present in a lot of communities in New Jersey. The state of New Jersey has its own complete streets policy, but basically the concept of everything is connected, we share a road, but we should be able to safely operate and share the road together, whether we're driving, whether we're biking, whether we're walking, and just having that connectivity to transit systems. A lot of the times we don't have walking paths or sidewalks that discontinue, that drop off, so it makes our trips more difficult. Connectivity and complete streets would be, maybe that's two things, but complete streets.
Thank you.
I'm also going to bend the rules a little bit. I think my first one is bike parking. I think bike parking is really important, both to help relieve some of the anxieties, and it also helps to reduce some of the costs. Like, biking is very, very cheap compared to even transit, which is very, very cheap. And in my case, I can bike to Journal Square, and that saves me a whole fare on the bus. Right? That eliminates one of my fares for the day. And I think the other aspect of that is City Bike. And City Bike is a little bit expensive right now. So City Bike helps solve a lot of the parking issues, a lot of the theft concern issues, and even the upfront expense of owning a bike. So if we can figure out better ways to make that affordable, whether it's through some sort of investment from the state or even the city level, that would be another big key.
Okay, I'm going to break rule 2 also, since you already did it, Tyler. All right, first one is I would like to see the Sherrill administration champion the Target Zero Commission action plan and implement it across the state. There are 72 actions. There's lots of room there to do things. And the second thing I'd like to see at a different level is I would like to see a better e-bike law passed by our legislators this summer, so that we are not putting restrictions on low-speed e-bikes and preventing the growth of a very critical micromobility sector for our first and last mile connections to transit.
So I'll break the norm and follow the rule. One thing I would say is leadership, and I think that's what is necessary in this space. I'm one of the reasons I accepted the job here and joined the Jersey City team. And when I went through the confirmation process, I met with every single council member, and every single one of them told me that their priority, they may define it differently, but their priority is to safety. We can't be seeing people killed on our streets. We have to find ways to make them safer. We have to find ways to see people have better mobility, better transit. Every single person, and that to me is leadership, as well as I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about my boss, the mayor, who was here, and the county executive, who was here. And having not only the elected leadership, but having the city and the state continue and accept those roles to do the things that they can do and continue to make the improvements that they can, and not, hide behind lack of budget or lack of resources, which obviously are real constraints, but to really just care and to show that leadership and to take action. I think that is the thing that will have the most results.
Thank you. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. We're sorry we ran a little late. We could talk about this all day, clearly.
Okay, you're almost done with me. So now we have a short 10-minute break, and at 2:30, listen up, because this is going to be more complicated than these other interludes.